This video is intended to show you how to finish a piece of pottery. So the piece of pottery that I'm finishing is a pinch pot, but these would work for any type of pottery that you make. The one thing to remember is that making pottery is not I'm gonna make something and get it done in a half an hour. It is, I'm going to create a piece and I'm going to continue to work on it for several days, smoothing it out, finishing it, making sure that it is as flawless as it can be. Remember that when you make a piece of pottery, you are making the earth permanent. You do not want to pollute the earth with bad pottery. So I have my pinch pot that I've made. It is the right size. This is about the size that it should be if you're meeting that 4 inches by 4 inches requirement. It takes a lot longer to make a piece this big, but I'm happy with the way it's gone. I've trimmed the rim, so I've gotten it pretty level, but all I need to do is smooth it and then add the finishing touches. So I did smooth part of it. So like on this side here, I did add a lot of smoothing and I went in and I used the rubber rib. On this side, this is not quite as smooth. You can still see that there's a lot of cracks and a lot of imperfections. And so to do that, taking the rubber rib is your key. So holding on the inside of your pot, using the rubber rib and really digging in and smoothing out that texture is what it takes. Another good way, honestly, your fingertip is the best smoothing tool you have. Adding a little bit of water with your finger and really digging into those cracks and those crevices to smooth those areas. You want this pot to be as smooth as possible. And not only that, but you want the thickness, the consistency to be the same throughout. So that thickness or consistency is 1/4 inch or the tip of your pinky. I always say the rule of thumb, if it's any thicker than your thumb, it's going to be at risk of exploding. So you want to make sure that it's very thin. You also want to kind of go around and check your thickness from the bottom to the top all the way around and make sure that it is consistent all the way through, that it feels like it's the same thickness all the way through. One hot tip is on your rims. Many of you, when making a pinch pot, are going to have little cracks that appear in your rim. So I actually kept one of these in here to show you. So this is a pretty common thing that can happen with students is you'll have a little crack in your rim. The best way to fix that is to actually just open up the crack, and then you're going to take slip and using just like a wooden tool or something, try to take slip and actually get it inside of that crevice. Don't just put it on the surface, actually get it in. And then what you're gonna do is try your best to push that into that crack or whatever issue that you're having, and then go over and smooth it out. You want to let that slip dry a little bit though. So if you go and you bend it right away, it's just going to pull right back open. So adding slip, letting it dry a little bit, and then smoothing it out, and that should resolve those issues. You might have to do it a couple of times, but that's one thing that most people will have happen with these. The other thing is how to smooth your rim. You want your rim to be nice and smooth at the top. One easy tip is using a wet paper towel. If you use a wet paper towel, you can actually roll it over your rim and you can work around your pot and you can smooth out that rim. You're never gonna have your pot be perfect, but it'll at least be a little bit better. You don't want that rim to be super sharp. And so going around and smoothing out that rim is a good tip. I should also mention too that this pot is leather hard. So I let this pot dry to halfway. And so once your pot is leather hard, then you can go in and smooth. You do not want to try to do smoothing when your pot is still plastic. Okay, you want to wait until it's about halfway dry or leather hard to go in and do this smoothing. You also want to wait for it to be leather hard when you do any slipping or scoring, because if you add stuff to a wet piece of clay, it could pull on it and it could warp the shape of your pot. You want your pot to be leather hard. To get it leather hard is the hardest part in a classroom because you're only here for 40 minutes every day working. So what a lot of students do is they'll actually wrap up your pottery with air in the bag. And so wrapping it up like this. So let's say that this is my pot that I'm trying to make a little bit more dry. I could actually just wrap it up with a little bit of air in the bag overnight, and hopefully that will harden it up. You don't ever want to do that over a weekend, just like overnight, but that should help harden it up a little bit. Obviously, if you don't want it to dry at all, you just wrap it up as tight as you can, okay? So the other thing I'm going to show is how to do some simple carvings, okay? So you'd never want to carve with a needle tool. A needle tool will make it sharp. And so when I use the needle tool, like let's say I make a line with the needle tool, and hopefully we can see this, that makes it really, really sharp. And it's just unappealing. You're not going to like that texture. And so the best way to do that is to go in with a smaller loop tool, something like this, these tools that have the green spray paint, going over those carvings will make those carvings a lot cleaner. And then what you're gonna do is just take your finger, try to knock those little crumbs out of there. You might have to do it more than once to get it out of there, but that's how to make your designs nice and clean. So this is a subtraction. Anything that you would remove or create a design would count as a subtraction. And this is a good example of a pot that has a lot of glaze on it. So when you finish your pots and they have a lot of glaze, the glaze will fill in some of those carvings. So if you carve your carvings too thin, it'll cover it up completely. You won't even see it. So you want to make sure that they're wide enough for that. This also, using a wider tool as well can be good for designs. So like making larger carvings. I really want you guys, don't just rush your design. I really want you to think about what you're doing and be intentional about what you're doing for your design when you're at that point, okay? Another thing that some people do is do what's called a scalloped design, where you can actually take a tool like this and you can actually make it look rough on purpose, so it gives it kind of a rock texture. And then you can smooth those out as well. So it gives it kind of an intentional bumpy texture. Some people like to do that to disguise the fingerprints because some people are frustrated that it doesn't look perfect. But remember, you can go to Target and buy perfect pottery. It should look handmade. This pot right here, I always have this on the counter by the glazes. This pot has a lot of different design ideas that are just very simple designs that you can do just with some normal tools that we have. So if you want to have some design ideas and you just want to take a look at this, any of these options, just let me know how I did it and I'll give you a quick little tutorial. Last thing is how to slip and score and make a foot. So you already know how to slip and score. So I'm just going to make what's called a foot on the bottom of my pot. So I'm just going to roll a coil for this. I know we haven't done coil yet, but you just take a little nub of clay and squeeze it, and then you're going to roll it on the table. You don't want to roll it too hard. You just be gentle. You want to try to keep it round. And then I actually like to square up my foot a little bit. So I'll show you when I get to that stage. So I'm rolling my little coil here. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it into the circular shape. And I'm going to size it on the bottom of my pot. And there's a lot of different ways to make feet as well. This is just a coil method, just like a round foot. You can add like little circles if you want to, anything like that. But what I'm going to do is just kind of size it right here. I'm going to overlap these two, and I'm going to take my fettling knife and cut through both of them at the same time. And then the excess pieces will remove, and then I have a ring that's the perfect size of the bottom of my pot, okay? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to square this up. I don't like it to be completely round. And so I just kind of flip it over. I notice I have a little crack in my foot, so I might have to slip and score that. We'll see how it goes. And then what I want to do too, once you kind of have that flat shape, you can go in and kind of clean up the edges if you want to try to make it precise. It's really up to you depending on what style of foot you're looking for. Again, this is just a simple round foot, but I want my foot to look same thickness all the way through. So I'm just going to trim both sides off. And so now I have just a nice little strip for my foot, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back on my pot, and I'm going to roll it. And it did get a little bit longer when I was flattening it, so I'm going to have to retrim this just a little bit. So same thing I did before. I'm going to cut through both pieces at the same time. And now I'm going to get to the point where I'm slipping and scoring. Okay, and a foot does two things, okay? A foot not only makes it more stable, but when you glaze, you are able to glaze the inside. You can't have glaze on the bottom of any of your pots, but you can have glaze on the inside of a foot. So then the only thing that doesn't have glaze is the ring on the bottom. So that's a nice perk of having a foot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip and score both sides. So I have a rubber rib. I actually forgot to get a rubber rib for my demo. Pretend this is a rubber rib. I'm not going to keep this pot, okay? So I score this. I would score this surface here. I would add slip in between. When I press that onto the clay, I want to make sure the slip like oozes out really well. And then I would go in and I would clean up the inside and the outside as much as possible. The only thing is, I see students do this all the time. Students will flip this over directly on their foot, like right after they make it. You want to let that foot dry a little bit so that it doesn't get smashed when you flip it back over. And the key is to try to blend it so that you can't even tell that it was slipped and scored. Like you want to try to go in and blend that seam as much as you can. You can use these wooden tools, the smoothing tools, and you can get in and you can blend on both sides, okay? So some students will just stick a foot on their pot without slipping and scoring, and they'll be like, oh, Mr. Hansen, this is perfect. But look how easy it is to pull off if I didn't slip and score. Okay, that's really easy to do. So you want to make sure that you score it really well. Now, in terms of finishing, once you have everything attached, you have your additions slipped and scored, you have your carvings or your subtractions removed, once you're happy with it, then you'll continue to smooth. You want to make sure that every single rough spot, everything is smoothed out. Take your time. Then you will put your name on the bottom. Do not use a needle tool. Always use like a little loop tool, put your name on the bottom. I would always recommend like your full first name or your full last name so that they don't get mixed up. And then approve it with me to put on the rack to dry out. Always approve it with me. Never put anything on the rack without approval, okay? And then that is how you finish a pot. So notice this was a fairly long demo, but it's because finishing your pots is the most important part. You want to make sure that you are spending time on this, okay? Last thing too, I forgot to mention, we have these little chocolate molds. A lot of students like to use these, and the way to do them is to just make a little ball. Like if you wanted to make designs like this, you just make a little ball of clay, put it on the table, push that nub of clay into that design, and then very carefully pull it off. And then all you can do is just trim around the design and you can slip and score those to your pot. So these little chocolate molds are a really good resource that we have, okay? All right, so that is the finishing, carving, addition, subtraction demonstration. Please spend time on these. Don't rush through them. And try your best to make them as consistent and clean as you can. Okay, that was a long demo.